Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another Marvel Crisis Protocol character spotlight. And today we are taking a look at probably one of the most efficient murder bots in the game. We are looking at Corvus Glaive. So yeah, we're going to go ahead and jump right into things here. We did talk about Proxima a little bit ago, so I think there's going to be some overlap there because obviously Corvus Glaive and Proxima Midnight have a lot of synergy together. So places where you bring one, typically it's not a bad idea to bring the other along with them. But still, I think there's some interesting things worth talking about on Corvus by himself. So we're going to go ahead and jump into him here. So starting things out, he doesn't have the most impressive base stat line. He's got threes across the board defensively here. So three on all three stats. He's got 6 stamina, which isn't bad, and he is coming in at 4 threat, although usually he is run as a 5, and we'll talk about that in a moment. He's a size 2 with a medium move, so nothing super impressive right out the gate here. 6 health I think is pretty standard for a 4 threat. 3s is actually on the lower end, and medium move is solid. He is on a medium base, so that medium move does get you a little further than it does for some other characters, which is really, really relevant for Corvus because he does like to be able to move around fairly quickly. Going into his attacks here, Corvus has 3 different attacks in his profile here. The first one is the Basic Strike. This is a range 2 5 dice physical attack. After the attack is resolved, he's going to gain power equal to the damage that he deals, so it is a builder attack, and it has a Wild Pierce. Change one of the defending characters' crit, wild, or shield results to a blank. I mean, Pierce is always good, especially on builder attacks where you're going to gain power for it. Basically, it means assuming your opponent blocked something, your first wild in your attack roll is effectively 2. So that's pretty good. This does do a little less into characters like who have stuff like Martial Artists where they count blanks. So you got to pick your targets somewhat carefully. But still, definitely something to help him get a little extra damage out there and build some extra power by doing that as well. So definitely a solid start for his profile here, but still nothing too crazy for a 4 threat stat line. We've definitely seen things similar to that before. His next attack here is Atom Splitter, and this is really his versatility attack. This is just here to give him some options if he doesn't have what he needs to do, what he really wants to do, but most of the time this is probably not the attack you're trying to use the most. It is an energy attack, so that's really, really nice. It is the only energy attack in his kit, so if you have an enemy that's really, really low energy and high physical, something like a Groot or a Venom, this could be a solid option into them. It's a range 4 dice attack, so you're getting a little bit less dice, and it doesn't have that pierce trigger that the strike has, but it does have, after the attack is resolved, you will gain 1 power. So it is a little bit more consistent on the power generation than the strike that has the pierce, and you're able to do it from further away, so there's a higher chance you can do this something like turn 1. So definitely not a bad thing to have in his kit, although definitely the attack he uses the least. Next, he has Death Blow. This is his spender, and it is a 4-cost physical attack. It's going to be range 3, throwing out 7 dice. After the attack is resolved, he may advance medium, and on a wild shield, he gets Flurry. After this attack is resolved, this character may make a strike attack, which is really, really good. Obviously, the trigger isn't the most consistent thing in the world on 7 dice. I don't know the exact odds on it, but I know it's not amazing. But being able to get a medium advance and then a strike attack that has a pierce on it right after is really, really nice. So it's definitely a solid spender here. But so far, nothing on this kit is really jumping out as like, oh, super killy attrition model. So we're going to have to see what else is on his kit to kind of make that happen. And we're kind of seeing that right away here with Glaive's Edge as his first superpower. This is a 3-cost active superpower. During the next strike or death blow attack this turn, he adds blanks in his attack roll to total successes. So that is adding a lot to the dice math. Blanks are really, really good, obviously. And when you combine that with things like having the pierce or just throwing 7 dice, it's really, really good. Notably, you can't use this on the Atom Splitter attack, so at this point, even if you're going into something that has better physical than energy, if you have the power to be using Glaive's Edge, you probably would prefer to be using the physical attack, even if they get more defense dice for it, because adding blanks is a huge deal, and if you're doing it on something like your strike attack, where you're hoping to gain that power back, definitely going to have a huge impact there. So really, really solid ability. A little bit expensive, but he does have solid power generation. And once he gets rolling and he can kind of use this to generate more power, it just kind of keeps going for him really, really nicely there. So that is pretty good right there. That is not the only thing that makes him one of the hilliest models in the game. We'll get to the rest of that in a moment. But next up, he has Husband of Proxima Midnight. So basically, at the end of his turn, if he's within 3 of an allied Proxima Midnight, he can pay 1 power to make Proxima Midnight immediately activate if she is not already activated. This is really, really good. The two of them can kind of set up kills for each other and then set up situations for the other one to use. When we talk about their tactics cards, we'll talk about how they can do that as well. And this definitely plays into that kind of attrition-y game plan that Corvus is going for, because you're going to be able to daze multiple models while only using a single one of your turns to do so. So that's really, really good, because then, of course, you're making it easier to gain or to hold priority, because you have multiple models going in the same activation. So it's almost as if your opponent has killed one of your activations without actually taking one of your models off the table. So really, really good for helping you keep priority, which is something that Corvus and Proxima really, really like to have. Next, he has the Glaive of Immortality, and this is just your standard damage reduction by 1 to a minimum of 1 when you would suffer damage from any enemy effect. And yeah, that's really, really good. Suddenly that 3-3-3-6 stat line doesn't look quite so like mediocre. That's actually pretty solid if you throw a damage reduction on there on top of all of the output that he has. Now, the thing that really, really makes Corvus interesting is that he is a gem bearer, and he can have either the reality or the time stone. So between the two, 99% of the time, you're going to see Corvus using the reality stone. While the time stone is interesting for him, it can help you get that flurry trigger. It can help you in the early game with getting, a little bit better power generation going if you're not rolling super hot at the beginning. It can be nice for that. But the reality gem does a lot for his consistency, and I think it actually does more than the time stone would do, which is kind of funny because the time stone is kind of supposed to be the consistency stone. The reality gem, for those who are unaware, basically says when making pretty much any roll, I believe it's attack, defense, I think it works on dodge and interact. When making any of those types of rolls, you can treat one skull in the roll as a critical. Now, this is a really, really big deal. This means when you are using Glaive's Edge, the only side of the die that Corvus fails on is a shield, or if he gets more than one skull. But at that point, that's just unfortunate. So he's counting 7 out of 8 sides of the dice until he gets his first skull, and then the second skull would be just a normal die. But that first skull is also counting as a critical, so it's adding another die that you're counting 6 out of 8 sides on, which is really, really good. That is really high consistency for damage. Now, if you're doing that on something like a strike attack as well, where you're gaining power for this, you have a wild pierce, and 7 sides of the dice are succeeding for you, you're almost guaranteed to gain that 3 power back for Glaive's Edge. It's really good odds. I can't overstate how much the reality gem impacts your attack roll odds, especially when you combine it with something like Glaive's Edge. Corvus hits like an absolute truck. It's not uncommon to see something like a death blow or a strike from Corvus deal more damage than it had dice. Because you're counting 2 sides as crits, and because those crits also have those really high odds dice, very, very realistic to see a 5 dice attacks turn into 6 or even more successes. Happens surprisingly often, and hits like an absolute truck, so cannot overstate that. But then this also applies to him defensively. You're going to have counting a skull on 3 dice, so now suddenly your odds on those dice are technically better than attack dice, because two of your successes are crits. So it's still 4 and 8, but 2 sides of the die are counting as crits. So that's also really, really big. And then, of course, you combine that with the damage reduction and the solid health pool of 6, and Corvus is really annoying to kill with the reality gem. He can tank a surprising amount, as well as hitting like an absolute truck. So yeah, the reality gem is amazing on him. The time stone is still a solid stone in the right situation, but unfortunately, I think the reality gem just wins for Corvus in pretty much every way. It's really, really strong with him. So, for all intents and purposes, for the rest of this video, we're going to be talking about him as if he's a 5 threat with the time stone, because 99% of the time, I think that is the best way to run him. Lastly, for Corvus Glaive's card here, is just worth noting that the back doesn't have anything change as far as I'm aware. If I'm incorrect, let me know down below. But pretty sure nothing changes here, so just different art, of course. But yeah, so we're going to go ahead and move on. And next up, we're going to talk about his tactics cards here. So he has two. The first one is Execute. So this is his shared card with Proxima Midnight. So Execute is a reactive, unaffiliated card, so you can bring this if you're splashing the pair of them. That says, when an allied Corvus Glaive targets an enemy character with an attack that is within range 1 of an allied Proxima Midnight, or when an allied Proxima Midnight targets an enemy character with an attack that is within range 1 of an allied Corvus Glaive, both characters may spend 2 to play this card. So when the attacker is attacking someone where the other of the two is beside that someone. So note, you can use something like Corvus's range 3 Spender, while Proxima is within range 1 of the target, and that actually works out really, really nicely because Proxima has her like spear attack that teleports her to the target. Obviously, I'm not going to spend too much time talking about Proxima specifically today, but if you are curious, definitely go take a look at her card and then see what she's capable of doing, or go check out the character spotlight we did on Proxima a little bit ago. But yeah, so she can use her spear to teleport towards the target, and then use her ability to let Corvus activate next, the same way he can make her activate next instead. And then he can play Execute and do a spender attack on the target. And what Execute actually does, because I'm realizing I didn't get that far, the enemy character rolls no defense dice during this attack. So really, really solid, especially if they have really good defense dice, whether it's they're counting blanks or they have tons of rerolls or something like that. Really good way of getting around those types of defenses. Great into stuff like Amazing Spider-Man, fantastic into models like Daredevil or Captain America, who can go up to 6 dice counting blanks. Really, really good ways of hitting those types of models. So yeah, really solid card. You do have to be careful of a couple things. If they use a bodyguard, or if they use sacrifice, or some other way of denying you that attack on your target of choice, the card is burned. So you got to be really, really careful. Make sure your opponent's stuff like that is either already been used or not currently available to them for one reason or another when you make this attack, because you don't want to waste the card. Obviously, the card doesn't come back. You don't get a chance to try again. It's just gone. So got to be careful with that one, but still really, really useful card in the right situation, in the right matchup. The other card here is First of the Black Order. This is a Black Order card, and it is something that you actually select during your leadership selection. So if your squad does not contain Thanos, the Mad Titan, so notably you cannot run Thanos while playing this card, after deployment, when you normally select your leadership, Corvus may play this card, and he gains the following leadership ability. Right Hand Man. It is for, of course, Black Order. When an allied Black Order character dazes or KOs an enemy character, all other allied Black Order characters gain 1 power. As far as power leaderships go, it's definitely on the less consistent and slower side, but it does allow you to run Black Order with a lower threat leader, and it's weird to say a 5 threat is a lower threat leader, but when you're comparing it to Thanos, who's typically run as an 8 or at least a 7, that's definitely something that can give you a lot of flexibility that Black Order doesn't really have outside of this. So definitely a solid like option to have. I don't think you're very often building around this leadership, though. I don't think there's too much you can kind of do to tier your team towards playing Corvus leadership and have your models be built around that ability necessarily, but you can definitely play around with some of the threat values and options you can play with by using this card instead of using Thanos' leadership. Of course, you are a tactic card down by doing this. This isn't one of those fancy ones that doesn't count towards your 6. So that's something you're going to have to keep in mind, is that you are cutting yourself a tactics card to use this leadership ability, but it is a reasonably good leadership ability. I mean, Black Order's whole kind of shtick is they are the attrition team. They're going to try and murder your things. So you're already kind of trying to play towards the leadership condition, and Corvus himself obviously plays very, very well towards that. So you are going to be able to proc it reasonably consistently and reasonably often, which is certainly nice. You just definitely want to be running a very kill focused team, which I think is what you're kind of already doing with Thanos most of the time. So a lot of models that would already be in your roster definitely still work with this. It just means you bring more of them instead of bringing Thanos. But that is it for his tactics cards. It is worth mentioning that in the Black Order affiliation, he also has access to Mothership and Blood Despair, both of which are very, very powerful cards. Mothership allows him to teleport up the board to a allied model that also pays for Mothership. It costs 2 power each, but one of the really fun things with that is in the Black Order affiliation, and or if specifically with Corvus, if you're running the Reality Gem on him, he's going to be starting with 2 power. And there are a lot of other models that have fairly consistent ways to have 2 power and be near the center of the board. Thanos most of the time will be starting out with 3 power, and he doesn't always need to spend all that much on his turn, or if he does, he's usually still getting to punch something, so he's going to gain some of that back, and he's ideally going to be on at least 2. Black Swan, if you ran the Power Stone with her, for example, will have lots of power, so you'll be able to do something with that. Yeah, Cosmic Ghost Rider, if he was able to make an attack, will be on at least 2 power. Ebony Maw with a stone. I think Supergiant even can have a stone. Or just have her omnipathy or omnipathy. I don't know how's that supposed to be pronounced. You guys can let me know. But there's a lot of different ways you can have a character on the midline who has more than 1 power. So if Corvus hasn't activated yet, you can teleport him right into your opponent's face and just start going right from turn 1, which is one of his favorite things to do. Um, so definitely something worth considering with Corvus there, is just his ability to kind of do stuff like that in Black Order. And then Blood Despair is also a really good card. It basically says when you would be dazed, you play this card, you get to make an attack, and then you're dazed. And for Corvus, I believe it allows you to use your spender attacks, so you could use that on a death blow. You could get the flurry, you could get mobility, you can get all sorts of crazy things on your opponent's turn when they daze Corvus. So really, really good card for him and definitely worth acknowledging in Black Order. Otherwise, Black Order is his only affiliation, and he definitely fits in really, really well here, whether you're running him as the leader or you're running him under Thanos. Either way, it's a very kill-focused leadership, and he is very, very good at that game. He synergizes particularly well with, of course, Proxima, as we already mentioned, for all of the things. Wife of Corvus Glaive on Proxima's card, husband of Proxima Midnight on Corvus's card. Obviously, those abilities are really, really good. And then in addition to that, they have Execute, which is great. She sets up really well for that with Spear Throw in that range 1 place. She can be a great model as well to just kind of get her up the board, kind of bait out, maybe she's on the middle line and she grabbed an objective or something like that, so your opponent's going to punch her. Well, now she has 2 power, Mothership in. So there's lots of strong synergy with Proxima and Corvus, of course, and then also Thanos has really strong synergy with Corvus. Um, Big thing just being Death's Decree. Obviously, the leadership getting victory points for KOing models is great, and Corvus is definitely playing that game. But Death's Decree is a really powerful superpower, and yeah, Thanos and Corvus make a great pair with that. When Corvus is on his healthy side, Death's Decree will bring something like your Death Blow up to 9 dice, which significantly improves the odds for that flurry trigger. When he's on his injured side, it goes up to 11 dice, which is kind of insane. And if you then add something like Glaive's Edge on top of that with the Reality Gem, you're now throwing 11 dice, where 7 out of 8 sides of the die count as successes, which is absurd. That hits really, really hard. I have seen that attack do more than 11 before, and it's terrifying. So yeah, that's a really, really powerful combo, specifically with Corvus. I think he's probably one of the best Death Decree targets that you could run. Now, I will say there is a tiny bit of an anti-synergy with the pairing of Corvus and Proxima with Thanos, and that is that Death's Decree is specifically once per turn. So you have to be careful with that, because when Proxima and Corvus use their abilities to make each other activate, it is still part of the same turn. So if you use Death Decree on one of them, you cannot use it on the other. tiny bit of an anti-synergy there. You just got to be mindful of it when you're playing. A lot of the time, the better answer is to use it on Corvus. But there are also situations where if you're pretty confident that they're not going to take down any of your models and you're still not going to be giving up priority or anything like that, you can just wait, have one of them go benefit from Death's Decree, let your opponent have a turn, and then go with the other one. No harm in doing that if you're confident that obviously you're not going to be punished for doing so, and it allows you to get the most out of something like Thanos' Death Decree. So definitely a lot of value there. The other thing with Thanos that's really useful is he has Cosmic Portal, and very frequently he's run with the Space and Mind Stones. These are all abilities that help him rearrange the board, and why this is important is because Corvus doesn't have much mobility on his own. We've talked about Mothership and we've talked about the Meat of Advance off of Deathblow, but without those things, he's not getting up the board any faster than just medium advancing. So having ways to kind of teleport him forward, or in Thanos' case, a lot of the time, bring his enemies to him, is really, really useful. You can use the Mind Stone to walk your enemies towards you, use Cosmic Portal to teleport them again, and Thanos can punch them and throw them. And with all of those things, you can really just pass something to Corvus right on the deployment line if your opponent wasn't careful in round one with where they were placing their models. So definitely a lot of rude things you can do with Thanos, and just kind of using him to set up Corvus to have a really, really strong start to the game. So yeah, really powerful pairing there. That those three models is a extremely powerful kind of like 16 threat Black Order core. For other affiliations, I think Corvus is actually a reasonably generic splash. He is a very hard-hitting 5 threat. He's relatively hard to kill because of that reality gem combined with the damage reduction. Those definitely make him a lot more annoying to kill than you would expect him to be. And I think he can play reasonably well in a lot of places. He's fairly self-sufficient. I mean, if you have things like Thanos where you can give him extra dice on his attacks, or give him rerolls or something like that even, he definitely doesn't mind stuff like that. I think extra dice is actually more valuable for him than rerolls most of the time because his odds of succeeding on his original dice are so high. Um, but you really don't need to focus too much on what the leadership is giving him because he's going to do what he's going to do already. So the things you really want are you're going to be looking for models that can help him get delivered to where he needs to go. You want things that'll help bring him up the board. You're going to be looking for situations where maybe it's not that hard to squeeze in both Proxima and Corvus, because if you can splash both of them, they are a very, very deadly duo together, and they're not Rocket and Groot. But yeah, there's a lot of places where they're potentially really, really good. Personally, I've played around with them in Hydra before. I played around with them, I think in Strucker Hydra was where I was playing them. They don't really gain much from Strucker's leadership. Like I said, that's not really the big thing for them. Proxima does hand out a fair bit of conditions, so that was kind of nice for her. But the big thing was in Hydra, they had access to there was a couple strategic geniuses giving them some rerolls. Those were kind of nice. But the real big thing was I was using Sleeper Agent to kind of deny my opponent any ability to react to stuff like Execute, or just in general, you can't bodyguard, you can't use escort to safety or anything like that while Corvus is going. You can't use paid damage reductions. He hits really hard in stuff like Beta Ray Bill there and stuff like that. I don't think it's the best place for him necessarily. Sleeper Agent is interesting on him, but I don't know if it's necessarily all that good because for those who are unaware, Sleeper Agent basically gives you the ability to say during your turn, your opponent can't play reactives or use any reactive superpowers, which is a really good ability. But if you fail to daze or KO with an attack, that goes away. So it's a little awkward with him because in the early game he doesn't throw quite enough dice to really guarantee one shots and things like that. You got to set him up with some of your other models. So it can be a little awkward there, but it is a fun combination, and I definitely do recommend trying it if you haven't before. There's some other places where he could be interesting if you're running him in somewhere like even Steve Vengers, where you can get that Glaive's Edge for a little bit cheaper. It means he technically has Glaive Edge round one, and then you can use something like Sam to bump him up the board with his airlift ability here. So you can use some stuff like that to help get him up the board a little faster, get some of his stuff online early game. There are some interesting things you can do there. But yeah, I think he's really not looking for specific affiliations as much as he's looking for models that will help him do his thing. Obviously nobody doesn't like the rerolls that Guardians of the Galaxy gives, but does he really need them? Not really. I think they're going to be more valuable on a lot of your other models. That said, I still don't think he's bad there. He's a 5 threat that hits hard, is relatively annoying to kill, and he can just kind of do his own thing while the rest of your team does their thing. So even somewhere like there, he's fantastic. Midnight Suns gives him a little bit of much needed mobility, so that's really interesting for him. Of course, one of the drawbacks there is that's one less model for your Siege of Darkness turn. So I think overall there's a lot of interesting places for him. Self-sufficient leaderships like Wakanda, Black Panther Wakanda, or um, Shield's Iron Man. Those would be interesting for him. In Shield, you also gain access to things like Stark Armory to give yourself some extra dice, so that could be really good for him. Definitely some solid places for him there. Defenders, getting those rerolls off of Daredevil. Again, not taking it away from someone else like you would be in Guardians, so it's solid there. I've actually toyed around with the idea. I haven't tried it myself yet, but I'd be curious to see how well it works of running him under somewhere like Red Skull 3, where you basically get the attacking benefits of Reality Stone just as part of the leadership. So it's once per turn instead of every attack. But still, it would be an interesting way of kind of running him as a 4 threat and seeing how well he does there. I haven't tried it myself. I'm curious to do so, but I haven't gotten around to it. And I wonder how he kind of overlap there with something like Killmonger, for example, who's kind of their resident murder bot in Cabal for that sort of game plan. But definitely some interesting options there. And yeah, I think I'm gonna kind of fall back to that other point of I think you're mostly looking at models that'll synergize with him though, stuff that'll get him up the board, stuff that'll maybe help him get a little extra dice here and there. Those sorts of things are going to be the big things that will benefit Corvus and play reasons why you might want to put him with specific models. Um, and then of course you'd want to bring Corvus somewhere where you feel like you're lacking hitting power. That's what he's going to provide for your team. So if you're feeling like, the list you're running is solid, but maybe you're missing a 5 threat and you really need a strong attrition piece, he can do that role for you really, really well. So if your affiliation doesn't already have something kind of filling that role, he's definitely a good option. But strongest place for him is definitely Black Order without a doubt. He gets a lot of benefits, and I think the favorite models for him in the game to kind of pair with are Proxima and Thanos, and of course both of them are affiliated there, so there's lots of benefits to doing that, but still cannot deny his value as a splash model. I do think he is definitely an underrated splash that can do a lot in a lot of different lists. So that is pretty much going to cover my thoughts on Mr. Corvus here. Let me know what you guys think down below. Did I miss anything? Are there places where you guys run him and you see a lot of success with them that I didn't mention here? Like I said, I was kind of focusing more on models rather than affiliations that synergize with him, but just very curious to hear what you guys think. Did I miss any models maybe that work really, really well with him? I could see something like Lockjaw maybe being really interesting with him for again, teleporting him up the board, giving him extra dice on that interdimensional bloodhound. I actually really like the idea of that. I might play around with that at some point. Ooh, and Medusa and Human Royal Family him up. Ooh, okay, I really like some of these ideas actually, but gonna have to play around with that at some point. So let me know where you guys have tried him out or where you think he might be really, really good. Definitely curious to hear what you guys think about Mr. Corvus Glaive here. But that is going to do it for my end. So I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, please do drop a like down below. Subscribe if you're new to the channel. We do stuff like this every week, and then we also have battle reports on the weekends. So if you like either of those things, feel free to jump on in. But that's going to be it for me. So until next time, have a great day, everybody. Peace.